to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher, and joining me as usual is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, man?
I'm worried, Pete. I'm worried. Something bad. I've just got that paranoid feeling. The weather's too nice, like the blue skies. Nothing bad's happened. My disaster cloud behind me light is currently off. Like,
oh yeah, wait a second. I got to take a closer look. Where's your light?
see, hold on. It's over my shoulder, but it's off. So we'll have to turn it on at some point. Hold on one sec. Something bad's happening. Oh no! What was that?
Nice. There's his light. You know, for the folks that only listen to this on audio, they're like, what is going on? But yeah, John has a beautiful disaster recovery cloud behind him, and things are looking very ominous. So yeah, and that can mean nothing other than the fact that we are talking about VMware Live Recovery, which was GA'd actually just this past week. So link below for the blog on that. So yeah, lots of things new in VMware Live Recovery. Some things that you may be familiar with already, but the good news is we don't have to guess about that, because we're bringing on some experts to talk about it. Some familiar faces to Virtually Speaking, starting with our good friend, Mr. Mike McLaughlin. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, so Mike's definitely one of our DR experts, and came over from Datrium, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So
Datrium to VMware to now Broadcom, still dealing with John's light.
Always surrounded by disaster. And no stranger to complete disasters is our good friend, Mr. Cato Grace. Cato, welcome back.
Yeah, good to be here, Pete, as always.
You know, I've been actually looking forward to this one, Cato, because Cato and I have been working together since John was roller skating in high school. He's been doing Site Recovery Manager since what was your first version of SRM?
I'm pretty sure it was 5.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's been a while.
And it was SRM versions did that same weird thing that ESX versions did, where I think SRM jumped from 1 to 2 to 5, I think.
Yeah. Lots of versions, lots of changes, and yeah, here we are again, 2024, more changes. And I definitely know if you're looking at VMware, you're looking at Reddit, there are a lot of questions about the new announcement, and so I figured what better conversation to have than have with the experts. Mike, let's start with you. I'd love to talk a little bit about what is VMware Live Recovery.
So VMware Live Recovery, and it was announced back at the end of last year at Explore. Think of it as rebranding and coalescing DR technologies, and it's a roadmap. I mean, let's talk about that. It is that. Cato and I have been working with the DR solutions for a couple of years now, and there's been a number of different solutions from VMware to solve this problem. And VMware Live Recovery is an attempt, and I think it's actually working really well, to simplify this, to bring it under one common umbrella, Live Recovery, and provide the underlying core solutions. And for right now, they are mostly unchanged. If you drill down a couple of levels, we're going to talk about the dashboard in a little bit, but if you drill down, the underlying technologies are still there, still familiar in how they work. And the idea here, though, is it is a simplification, so that when you were talking about disaster recovery, it's going to be one of the live recovery use cases, and bringing the technologies together for the longer term, plans here. So it is, think mostly a rebranding. So new names to learn, maybe some new icons to recognize, and a little bit different packaging is really the essence of what happened in the last week. All right, it was kind of a perfect storm of the cloud services portal, the site recovery manager capabilities, and the VMware Cloud disaster recovery pieces now all sort of living under one roof. Now they're still doing slightly different things. All right, and we did some things kind of following along a lot of the change that you talked about that's been happening since November, with simplification of just product offerings, all of the SKUs, all of the ways things are acquired. We're trying to make this a little simpler too, for what's the core thing that a data center person worries about, and that's protecting a virtual machine. So now protecting that virtual machine becomes the core piece of how I get live recovery. So the idea of a single protected virtual machine has now bubbled to the top as part of this whole re-architecting, rebranding, repackaging. And I think that makes it very simple now when you're talking about, site to site to cloud, this and that. The focus starts with, what am I trying to protect? And it is the virtual machine running in VMware Cloud Foundation or any vSphere, vCenter environment.
And so protecting obviously is important, but that's not always successful, is it? Sometimes things happen that are beyond our control.
Well, and that's why you're going to want to have, a secondary site or maybe a secondary set of processes for if you haven't lost the site, but maybe you're going through a cyber attack. So we've got two key use cases under live recovery. One of them is for site disasters, and one of them is for cyber disasters, because they're slightly different. They have different approaches to them and different resolutions to them as well. And so site disasters, you need another place to run your business. John was talking about the weather and his cloud sign. If your primary data center is not accessible and not working for whatever reasons, Mother Nature, man, error, you need to run your business somewhere else. And that's site to site disaster recovery. All right. Now, what if we've talked about this before? What if the primary site is all still fine and working, but the things inside of it have gotten very bad? You've had a cyber attack of sorts. So the live cyber recovery part of live recovery is going to address that. We can talk about that in a little bit more detail as we sort of peel this back.
So you mentioned, I guess, there's the difference between just the traditional site recovery where we would have used the SRM type workflow and the cyber recovery. I do remember, prior to everything just kind of getting moved into VMware Live Recovery here, there was like a separate add-on, I think, for the ransomware and more the cyber attack side. Is that still a discrete add-on, or is this just all one thing now?
Yeah, so it's all just one thing now. Yeah. So you have that single license, and you can use it either for the site-to-site protection, and that site-to-site can be either on-prem to on-prem or on-prem to the cloud, or you can use it for ransomware protection. So you can do it for either. Think of it as a license per recovery point or replica copy.
Yeah, we're still getting back to the core thing. Is the license, the SKU right now is a protected virtual machine.
Yeah. Okay.
And so we can use either of these underlying technologies, and we might have to have multiple copies of that, but that's a configuration detail.
Yeah. Okay.
So I just heard configuration details. Let's talk about configuration details. What are the mechanisms underlying the migration of that data? I know we've had various APIs over the years, things people use to eat data around array buffloads. What are my options in terms of moving that data from my primary to the secondary site?
Well, let me speak first for VMware Site Recovery, and then I'll let Mike speak to VMware Cyber Recovery. So with VMware Site Recovery, previously Site Recovery Manager, you can do that using either storage arrays. So you have some underlying array technology that supports replication. You're using that to move the data from one site place to the other. That can either be just straight up traditional array replication, or we can actually use vVol replication if you have arrays that support that. And then the other option is vSphere replication, which has been around now for more than 10 years. But in this release, we actually enhanced the data path for vSphere replication, which allows it to perform at a whole lot better level. It can achieve an RPO now as low as 1 minute. And then just the standard replication, the amount of bandwidth that it's using and the time that it takes in general, we've cut both of those down by almost 50% in both cases.
Let me ask you a little history question then. So I'm sure it's similar to some extent, but I haven't looked at it in a little bit. So in the past, all these storage vendors, the NetApps of the world, would create these storage replication adapters that would manage all of these replications. And for what it's worth, yeah, it worked, but it man, sometimes these array-based replication technologies they just weren't perfect. Sometimes they would disappear. Sometimes like, where did that replication go? They weren't integrated into the product. And it's certainly not, I'm not throwing shade at any vendors, but I'm just wondering, like, has that gotten better over the years, the management of the replication outside of vSphere?
Yeah, definitely. So the SRAs, the cool thing about them is that they're really just communicating with the array, and then it's the mechanism for site recovery for previously SRM VMware Site Recovery, for that to communicate with the storage array and to understand what's going on with the array, and then to ask it to do things. And yeah, so over time, that has definitely improved. I mean, just like anything else with Site Recovery Manager, the cool thing about VMware Site Recovery is that it basically has been doing the same thing since we created it. We've just been enabling it to do that better. We've shaved off the edges, we've simplified it, we've optimized the UI, we optimized the workflows. But yeah, it's doing the same thing. It's helping you not even helping you replicate. It's monitoring the replication of your VMs and then orchestrating their recovery and giving you an ability to non-disruptively test that. So
yeah, and using vSphere replication when there's not some other storage array to do the actual replication.
Exactly. And we've continued to improve on, again, same thing with vSphere replication. It's, we released it 10 years ago, and over those 10 years, we've continued to refine and enhance and improve it. And really, in this latest release, we added probably the biggest changes that we've done to the way that it works. And specifically, what we did was changing the data path. So previously, vSphere replication, the way that the data would flow is it would go from the host that the VM was running on at the source site to the appliance at the target site. And then that appliance would then work with the host at the target site to write that data to the target data store. So the appliance was in the data path. And the thing that engineering worked out is, and they've been working on this for a number of years, and it finally came to fruition, is they've optimized the data path to now where it flows directly from the host at the source site to the host at the target site.
Nice.
So the appliance is fully out of the data path. It's there as just a management and a connection broker, but not in the data path anymore. And that's what enabled us to optimize things. So pretty cool stuff.
Very nice. Very nice. So Mike, back to you. Let's talk a little bit about, I know that VMware drastically changed their licensing models, and we could talk for hours just on, I don't know, I don't want to digress, but I do love the idea now that VMware actually is shipping VCF as just a product, and then all these components are part of it. I do like that decision, but as part of that, there's a lot of different add-ons, and this being one of those, this VMware Live Recovery being one of those. Can you tell me a little bit about what it looks like inside of VCF? You mentioned that there's a new dashboard.
So the dashboard actually runs in the Cloud Services portal.
Okay.
So it runs outside of the sites because it's going to give you kind of a global view of all of your DR sites and setup. So for organizations that have multiple vCenters, multiple sites, multiple locations, we now have a higher level dashboard view that encompasses both live site recovery, formerly SRM, and those pairs of sites, as well as VMware Live Cyber Recovery, formerly VMware Cloud DR, and the protected sites and the cloud-based for that. So this shows up in a global dashboard where you can see your net use across all of the configurations that you're deploying VMware Live Recovery into, whether they are site-to-site or site-to-cloud or ransomware recovery oriented. I wanted to touch base briefly on take John's question about the replication, because if you have both sites, as Cato was saying, we've got vSphere replication and some enhancements there. The storage array adapters can be there if you've got the same storage on both sites. But for live cyber recovery, there is one, let's call it a wrinkle. There's one extra thing to worry about, and that is, where am I replicating my protected virtual machines. So I've got this protected virtual machine license, and now I want to replicate that to my ransomware recovery solution. I need to have a storage target there. And so the cloud file system is a key part of that. And one extra aspect to what this looks like under the covers is also protected terabytes. All right, so we're going to keep track of those virtual machines and how much they're consuming on the cloud file system, which we're using for ransomware recovery. That's already built in. If you set up both of your sites, you've already paid for the storage underneath. And so you don't need to pay for additional storage if you've already got it. But if you're using the ransomware recovery features of Live Cyber Recovery, we're going to need to have copies of those virtual machines, those protected virtual machines, offsite in a safe place that we can do the remediation work. Okay. So that is one extra sort of add-on to the add-on. Is there's this protected virtual machine concept, but if you're doing the cyber recovery, we're also going to basically charge at that point for the cloud file system capacity to store that work.
Yeah, storage isn't free. That makes sense. You either pay for it CapEx on your side or you pay for it OpEx in the cloud.
Exactly.
Yeah, nothing too crazy there, I feel like. But from a perspective of this, that is segmented out, that is kind of hidden behind. It's within VMware's tenant that they're handling that bucket. And that separation just makes so much more sense from a cyber protection because I love my local, or near far replication SRM sites. But when we get to that cyber component, I need something that's immutable. And I like the whole idea of like, it's not my AWS account. It's not my S3 bucket. It's not my EBS, block. It's if my entire environment's compromised and they've found every single password vault, they still haven't, compromised VMware on the same day. Yeah. And so from that perspective, you've got that segmentation during what's ultimately one of the most stressful events of your life. I talked to someone last week who talked about a customer having a heart attack actively during that. Wow. And I thought, yeah, that could cause one. I don't mean to make light of it. Like, this is it's some serious stuff here. And having this be in someone else's infrastructure that I'm doing the recovery, that just seems so key, that having, it be their storage, this is something I ran into when I had a customer get ransomware, is it filled up their entire storage array. And so then, it's like, well, we want to delete that. Well, we want to see if we can try to get the keys back. Like, there's having swing storage, that whole cloud component, paying for that storage separately and being able to burst that compute, that really helps manage the stress. And hopefully you don't have cardiac events, I guess.
Yeah, there's actually one other thing. You talked about the segmentation, and in the cyber recovery space, in ransomware recovery, we call it the isolated recovery environment. All right, it's a place where you can go safely do the remediation work and do that kind of on the fly. I'll say sort of on demand, but or burst, like you were saying, is I've got my recovery points somewhere else. All I need is some compute and some networking and some software and some tools and some people and a wall around that. And we're leveraging VMware Cloud on AWS for all of that. So we actually have that as a service capability for the core pieces of what we're going to do in the ransomware recovery workflow. And we're going to leverage that offsite cloud file system as all of the recovery points that we can pick from. So you kind of get this best of both worlds when you're trying to do the remediation. In a site disaster, you just want to fail over and get up and running as fast as possible.
Yeah.
In a cyber attack recovery, you want to get healthy as quickly as possible, and that
you need a clean room.
You need a clean room. I mean, you need an ICU. You need some kind of isolation, or the problems will just keep coming back. You'll have Groundhog Day over and over again.
Yeah, and that's
with
still
no
built
happy
into
ending.
It. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and that's still built into the VMware Live Recovery, is that whole isolated environment where you can actually do the cleaning, if you will, and get back to a healthy area completely with network isolation. So your applications, you can still clean them, check them, and then restore.
Yeah, and run them somewhere where they're not in production, they're not at risk, and you can basically bring your infrastructure and your security team together and solve the problem that just made it through the front door.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
and
go ahead.
One of the other cool things that we've added in this release of Live Recovery is an integration between cyber recovery and site recovery. So up until now, we didn't have a way that you could offer both of those protections at the same time for the same VM. And now we actually have that. So if you're protecting a VM right now, it's only with array replication. We don't currently support it with vSphere replication. So you're protecting a VM with array replication site to site. You can also protect that VM to VMware Cloud with cyber recovery at the same time. Now that is 2 licenses, just to be clear, because we're talking replica copies, not just per VM. But to be able to have both of those protections at the same time, because they really are 2 different things, is pretty powerful.
Yeah, these are 2 totally different software solutions. But
Yep.
now with this merging, what you're saying is you can actually treat this in one interface and provide both the disaster recovery, but also the ransomware recovery.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty smooth.
Oh, it's back to that simplification. We want to protect the virtual machine for site or cyber attack.
Yeah. So is all this done in VMware Cloud on AWS? I know we need a place to park this stuff, and it's got to go somewhere. And the cloud obviously is, clouds are not real clouds, right? These are servers somewhere. So like, where is all of this magic happening?
For VMware Live Cyber Recovery, for the ransomware recovery, the isolated recovery environment, that is happening in VMware Cloud on AWS on hosts that are provisioned from that capability.
Okay.
The cloud file system sits offsite right next to it, so we can get an easy, quick mount of access to the recovery points. Any of the other tools that are running in that environment are available to you as well. So it is running offsite, it is running in the cloud, but one of the key things is during the remediation process, you're not running production workload. You're healing the virtual machine. And so, you could do that anywhere that you can get, like I said, storage servers, networking, people, tools, processes, kind of all laid out and organized for you, or the live cyber recovery platform kind of pulls that all together.
And then SRM, VMware Site Recovery, is running in all the places that Site Recovery Manager normally runs. So, you're talking on-prem to on-prem. SRM currently also supports going to hyperscalers. So, we're talking Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle Cloud. For right now, those aren't roped into VMware Live Recovery, but that's definitely something that we're working on. And then the same thing goes for VMware Site Recovery, which was Site Recovery Manager and vSphere application available to VMware Cloud on AWS. Again, working on building that into VMware Live Recovery as we move forward.
I guess the most important question is, how long is it going to take you to say VSR and not SRM? Because I mean, SRM is just like its own thing. Like it's just, forget about site recovery. It's SRM. Like, I don't know.
Well,
I feel like I'm going to be calling it SRM for the next decade.
He's got to go get the tattoo removed, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to take as long as it has for me to say, VMware Explore instead of VMworld.
Yeah.
Like it's still like one I have to think about. The other one I just say by default.
Isn't it VMware by Broadcom Explore now? Just kidding. No, it's definitely not. I'm kidding.
Well, one of the good things is the Site Recovery Manager, also known as SRM, is the site recovery piece of VLR. So there is they didn't change the name drastically. So hopefully we can retrain myself and Cato and everybody else that has to look at the new PowerPoints.
Yeah. But just for anybody that's out there, existing SRM customers, some things to just think about. We're talking about changes of name and getting used to all of that, and you'll go through that experience. But just know that underneath the covers, this is still just SRM. So if you're running SRM 8.8 or something earlier, and you upgrade to SRM 9.0, which is this latest release, it's just a standard upgrade. There's nothing different about it, nothing, weird, or you don't have to do any reconfiguration or change, redo anything. And then when you get to the place where you're ready to start using VMware Live Recovery, again, even that is just, you're going to connect your environment to that cloud console, and then you're good to go. Again, it's still like you're not having to reconfigure. There's no big change in how things work. And it's really the same thing with VCDR. VMware Cloud DR, that is really just a rename. We're changing the name to this new thing. Other than that, it's, everything functions the same. It's the same, you use it the same, you interact with it the same. There's no transfer of data or anything as part of the switch to VMware Live Recovery. It's, same things underneath.
So speaking, again, though, on that same thing underneath, there's still some big improvements. I mean, we're getting that 1 minute recovery point. We're getting all those other improvements. We're getting the fan out architecture, like all this stuff. So all the things that were on your wish list are definitely coming true. I am curious. I know SRAs are still, going to be used for various reasons, but are you seeing a tilt, slowly from vSphere replication and people using it more and more than SRAs? Do you still see an even split? Like what are you seeing in terms of that?
We've seen more and more adoption of vVols. I have seen an increasing use of vVols among customers.
Interesting.
And vSphere replication continues to increase as well. It started off really as, when I first started at VMware, I mean, obviously dating myself a bit, 10 plus years ago, people thought of vSphere replication as something that was not production ready or not enterprise ready. And so you might have smaller customers using it, but larger customers would look at it and just be like, yeah, no, I'm going to use an array, and at that point, we're talking, the split between, array replication and vSphere replication is probably like 95-5 or something like that. Now we're closer to 60-40. I think, 60% of customers using array replication, 40% using vSphere replication. And really, it's actually probably more of an overlap. It's probably like 60-50 or something, because you have a number of customers.
There's people use both.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you've already got an array, you've already paid for the licensing for that replication. You're probably already doing that. So it's like, fine, as long as you support what I'm already doing, absolutely. But for those that are starting to make changes, maybe you're moving off of a specific array or something like that, it's nice to know
different platforms, even within the same vendor. You're not going to do a replication necessarily from a Compellent to a PowerMax, and band. So.
Yeah, and that's what's cool about Site Recovery Manager is that flexibility of being able to do both. And see, there it is. I still said Site Recovery Manager.
I'm not going to correct you. VSR. We all got to say it. VSR. Just kidding.
Well, technically VLSR, but
yeah,
does not roll off the tongue.
I love it. Nice, gents. I know we're getting close to the hour, so I wanted to just any closing thoughts or suggestions for folks that are looking into VMware Live Site Recovery and VMware Live Recovery.
I would say stay tuned to the announcements, because it got announced back in November, and then the culmination of all these technologies coming together fairly recent. You'll probably see a lot more information and description and things coming from us now that we have, one roof over it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Less places to go looking around, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Very nice. Last question for you guys. Virtually Speaking Podcast just changed our logo. What do you think? I'm still trying to decide whether or not I like it. Can you see it on the screen there?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I'm thinking about changing
it. It's a nice switch.
I've been distracted by the dots and the audio wave.
I found them strangely hypnotic.
Yeah, exactly.
It's working. My evil plan is working. Excellent. I have hypnotized my guests. Thank you so much. Cato, as always, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Mike, great seeing you, man. Welcome back to the podcast. We hope to have you guys on again. And we look forward to hearing more about VMware Live Recovery. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.